Welcome. Welcome to Celebrate Aging. I'm Vicki Marthaler, your hostess today, and we are going to spend the next 10 minutes on a little teaching, a little learning, a little bit reminding about what this week, this Holy Week, is all about. For there's many invitations in the paper for different churches having special services this week, and here at Emmanuel Community, we also follow the church calendar, and we too are having special services. And sometimes it's good to be reminded what that is all about. And I know here at Emmanuel, our residents, the majority of them have been attending church all their life and been participating in their congregations and have been very active in growing in their faith, and they continue to grow in their faith here too, even in the years of their life where they might need a little more assistance than they have before. And so we have a wonderful chapel, an area, a sacred space that is set aside for worship and for growing in faith. And I'd like to just take a little bit and walk through Holy Week with you, what the Christians designate as starting with Palm Sunday and culminating in Easter worship service. Just reminding us again what it is all about and why we take this special time set aside. It actually truly begins on Ash Wednesday, the beginning of the Lenten season. And the Lenten season is 40 days that are prior to Easter that remind us of the journey that Jesus takes to the cross. It's a time of reflection, time of meditation, a time of just spending time in the Word and thinking about our faith and how we view God and how God views us, and all of those kinds of thinking and wondering and reflection and in that journey time. And so now we become to the last week in Lent, which is often called Holy Week. And I'm going to begin with a little bit of a cartoon, a little bit of a joke. It's about a woman who rarely attends worship, and she stopped before the minister at the door of the church, and she asked, "Why is it that when I come to church, you're always singing, 'Christ the Lord is risen today'?" Well, I guess in her world, that she comes to church quite not very sporadically, and maybe just on Easter, to hear that good hymn, "Christ the Lord is risen today." But before we get to Easter, we're on our journey to the cross. And I'm standing in front of a couple of different crosses. There is much symbolism in the cross, and we know that in Jesus' day, in biblical times, the cross was used by the Romans as an instrument of torture. That they were, many people were crucified. In fact, Josephus, a historian of that time, talks even about a period where the Romans crucified over 3,000 people at one time. And this was a display of their power, for they ruled by fear. And as they crucified people, they just didn't go off into the North 40 and do it quietly, but they would place the posts of the cross, the up and down part of the cross, they would place them right along the highways that they would build. The Romans were noted for their Roman roads, so that their soldiers could get to one place or another quickly. They had a vast empire, and they needed to control it, and to control it well. And so they built all these roads, and alongside the roads they would put these posts. And they were reminders that if people got out of line, that they could be tortured in this way, that they could be crucified. And so the posts were alongside the roads in public places where people walking and traveling throughout the countryside could be reminded of the Roman rule. And then when somebody was crucified, they carried the crossbars to the posts, and then they were hung on the cross. And many pictures we see of referring to Jesus and his crucifixion, many of the pictures we see of the cross high and above, and that people are below looking up. But in reality, the people hanging on the cross, their feet were probably this far from the ground. And that was part of the torture, to be so close to the ground and yet not there. And then the people who were not crucified but were forced to walk by this this spectacle, they could actually look into the eyes of the person and again be controlled by that fear and that threat that this would happen to you if you do not obey the Roman law. So the cross is the centerpiece of our Lenten journey, and certainly the centerpiece of Holy Week, for this will be the way that Jesus dies. And the cross, the symbols have changed because they're transforming. Jesus took the cross, an instrument of torture, and now has changed it into life. That is his power. That is his transforming power. But this cross ends with an anchor, and reminding us that the promises of Christ anchor us in all the days of our life, that anchor us in faith. So this, at the anchor holds, it's a song, and it reminds us that Christ has come to anchor us into God's love. This cross comes into an orb. It's called the cross in the orb, and it represents the world. And I appreciate it because it shows how Christ came into the world. He didn't hover above or was disconnected from it, but he comes into the world, bringing life and new life. And then this cross, sometimes the residents say, you've got that one upside down. But actually, this is the cross of St. Peter. And of all the disciples, only one dies a natural death, and that's John. He dies of old age. But all the other disciples are martyred. And Peter was crucified, and he asked those who were nailing him to the cross that if he could be put upside down, he did not want to die as his Lord. And so this is St. Peter's cross because they honored his wish. And then this cross, if you've ever seen this symbol before, this is called the Jerusalem cross, and it reminds us of the wounds of Christ, that he wore a crown of thorns, that he was nailed in his hands and in his feet, and he was speared at his side when they were trying to decide if he truly had died on the cross. And so this reminds us of the suffering and the wounds and all that was endured on the cross. So many different symbols on our Lenten journey then to bring us to Palm Sunday. And Palm Sunday is the day we have the palm branches and sing the hosannas. And the palm branches, for the Jewish people, that is like waving the American flag. It's a sign of patriotism. The time between the Old and the New Testament, that span of time we call the Maccabean time, was a time when the Jewish people were free and ruling themselves. And when they made coins, they put the palm branches on the coins, for that was their symbol of freedom. Well, as we get into Holy Week, there's a Maundy Thursday, where we remember the Last Supper. Maundy is a Latin word, and it comes to the English word mandate, an order, a command. And there are Christian people that will receive communion standing dressed and ready to go while they're sharing that meal. And then Good Friday is the Tenebrae service, the service of darkness, where the words of Christ, his last words from the cross, are read. And then the altar is stripped and it's covered in black as we await Easter Sunday. So I'd like to just share with you one little story of the resurrection. And it has to do with a man named Nikolai Ivanovich Bukharin, who at one time was a Russian communist leader, and he was out to destroy Christianity in the Russian Empire. And he came to a group in 1930 addressing them, talking of atheism and telling them that Christianity needed to be destroyed. And at the end of his time, he asked if there was anyone who had anything left to say. And there was a very old man who made his way to the podium. And looking out over the group of people who had been assembled, he said, "Christ is risen." And in mass, the group rose and said, "He is risen indeed." And that is the power of Easter. It is faith coming alive within people, being connected to God. And I pray that this season will be a time of you to grow in your faith and ask that God would bless and keep you. This is Emmanuel Community praying for you and saying God's blessings to you.